What if I told you Hogwarts wasn't a life sentence? That you could actually transfer to another magic school, like switching out of Gryffindor for a semester in Beauxbaton? Sounds fake, right? But it's real, and one character proves it. This tiny detail flips everything we thought we knew about wizard education. Why has no one talked about this? What are the rules? And how many secrets are these schools really hiding? If you thought the sorting hat was the final word, think again. Most people think magical education is set in stone. Once you're sorted or enrolled, that's it. End of story. But nope. Turns out magical schools have their own version of transfer paperwork and awkward "welcome to our weird traditions" speeches. Take Natsai Onai, for example. In Hogwarts Legacy, she transfers from Ouagadougou, which floats in the air by the way, no big deal, to Hogwarts like it's just changing neighborhoods. Except, there's always some magical fine print. Now, before you go imagining a magical Uber cart taking students across continents, let's clear one thing up. Transfers depend a lot on location and magical jurisdiction. Yep, just like Muggle schools. You want to attend Beauxbaton. Better live in the right region. Or have a very persuasive owl and some political connections. The magical world has borders too. And they're not exactly easy to cross when you're 12 and your biggest spell is Lumos. Some say transfers happen because of special talents or family issues, but let's be real. Sometimes a student just wants out of Durmstrang because the vibe is too dark and brooding. Imagine sitting through class with everyone dressed like they're auditioning for a villain role. No wonder someone might think, you know what? I'd rather freeze at Hogwarts than go full Sith Lord here. You get the idea. And don't forget the cultural shock. Natsai goes from casting spells in a giant open-air African school carved into a mountainside to a drafty old castle full of ghosts and talking hats. That's a major upgrade or downgrade, depending on your weather preferences. But it does show that even in the wizarding world, change is possible, even if it comes with mandatory cauldron upgrades. Now all of this opens a much bigger question. What if Harry had been in a different house? I mean, would the sword still have come to him? Let's talk about that. Because Gryffindor's sword isn't just a cool magical relic, it's a game changer when you're stuck in a chamber with a basilisk and no backup. You ever notice how Harry gets ridiculously lucky at the most dangerous moments? Like, he's down in the Chamber of Secrets, cornered by a massive basilisk, bleeding out, no wand, and poof, here comes Fawkes, dropping off a magic sword like DoorDash for Gryffindors. But here's the catch. That sword doesn't just show up for anyone. It only presents itself to a true Gryffindor in a moment of real need. And no, bravery under mild inconvenience doesn't count. Now imagine for a second. What if Harry had been sorted into Hufflepuff? Would the sword have just stayed home? Probably. The Sword of Gryffindor has some strong opinions about house loyalty. And in the Chamber of Secrets, it was the sword that actually gave Harry the edge, pun absolutely intended. No sword, no victory. Just Harry, a broken wand, and a giant serpent with very sharp opinions about teenagers. People love to say the wand chooses the wizard, but in this case, the sword kind of plays favorites. It's like the ultimate magical VIP club, Gryffindors only, and you better be in serious danger. It doesn't show up because you're stressed about finals. It shows up when you're about to be eaten alive. And for the record, that's very specific. Customer service. Let's not forget how the sword absorbs what makes it stronger. After killing the basilisk, it literally soaks up the venom, like it's leveling up in a video game. Later on, that very venom is what helps destroy Horcruxes. So yeah, the sword isn't just some heirloom, it's a plot-driving, prophecy-worthy piece of magical engineering. But here's something to chew on. If magical objects have minds of their own, does that mean Nagini, Voldemort's favorite snake/living Horcrux, could just die of old age? I mean, she's alive, right? So let's unpack that next, because it gets real weird, real fast. Now here's a thought that keeps magical philosophers up at night. Can Nagini, the slithering nightmare that is also a Horcrux, just keel over? One day from good old natural causes? Like, 1 minute she's guarding Voldemort's soul, the next she's a stiff noodle on the floor. It sounds silly, but it's actually a serious magical loophole. After all, even though she contains part of Voldemort's soul, she's still technically a living creature. She eats, she moves, she hisses dramatically. That means she's subject to biology, right? If you compare her to Harry, who was unknowingly a Horcrux too, it kind of tracks. Harry could have died from literally falling down the stairs at Privet. Drive, Horcrux or not. The soul fragment inside him didn't come with extra lives or immortality perks. It's not like Voldemort gave them Horcrux health insurance. So yeah, technically, Nagini could have dropped dead from old age, disease, or a tragic encounter with a magically enlarged mongoose, and that opens up a whole new question. Why didn't the heroes just wait her out? I mean, imagine Hermione saying, "Guys, hear me out. Let's just hide for 20 years and let the snake die of natural causes." Not very cinematic, but potentially effective. Of course, that's assuming she would die naturally. Magic has a way of making everything complicated, and when it comes to Horcruxes, we know Voldemort chose his vessels for their durability and magical significance. He wasn't exactly tossing soul shards into teacups. Also, fun fact, Nagini wasn't just any snake. According to Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, she was a maledictus, a cursed woman doomed to eventually become a snake permanently. That means she was once human, with thoughts, feelings, and probably a skincare routine. So her mortality? Even more confusing. She's alive, but cursed. And cursed things tend to have expiration dates written in fine print. Now speaking of fine print, where do we even get this kind of information? How do we know these things about magic, Horcruxes, and cursed snakes? Well, let's talk about the sources next, because trust me, it's not just headcanon and Reddit threads. Alright, let's address the broom in the room. Where do all these oddly specific magical facts come from? No, it's not just someone making stuff up while sipping pumpkin juice. Everything you hear on this channel is pulled from an arsenal of sources that would make even Hermione jealous. We're talking books, movies, game lore, interviews with J.K. Rowling, and even those obscure Wizarding World articles that only the nerdiest of nerds read at 2 a.m. Now, sure, some details evolve depending on the medium. What's said in Hogwarts? Legacy might not line up perfectly with what's in the Half-Blood Prince. And you know what? That's okay. The magical world is layered, like a chocolate frog with a surprise card inside. Each layer adds nuance and sometimes contradiction. It keeps the fandom alive and arguing, which honestly is kind of the sport of being a Harry Potter fan. Some of the juiciest insights actually come from outside the main series. Rowling's interviews often contain golden nuggets, like when she clarified that wizards used to just vanish their bodily waste before plumbing existed. Not exactly Hogwarts curriculum, but still weirdly important. Then there are games like Hogwarts Mystery or Legacy, which expand the lore in ways that give us context for stuff the books only hinted at. And let's be real, sometimes it's not about where the info comes from, but how you use it. We dig into timelines, trace character arcs, even cross-reference spells to piece things together. Think of this channel as your friendly magical investigator. Less Ministry of Magic, more Ministry of making sense of the madness. Because, let's face it, there's a lot of magical chaos out there. Speaking of chaos, what about those unforgivable curses? Are they really the worst thing you can do with a wand? Or is the wizarding world hiding some even darker tricks up its sleeve? You might be surprised. Everyone knows the big three, the unforgivable curses. Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperio. They're basically the holy trinity of dark magic, and using any of them earns you a one-way ticket to Azkaban. No questions asked. But here's the kicker. Just because they're unforgivable doesn't mean they're the only spells capable of total destruction. Ever heard of Sectum Sempra? That thing slices people open like a magical meat cleaver, and it came from a school textbook. The reason they're labeled unforgivable isn't just the damage they cause, it's the intent. To use Imperius, you have to fully want to control someone. To cast Crucio, you have to mean every ounce of that pain. These aren't spells. You stumble into during a sleepy defense against the dark arts class. You have to want it, and not in a good way. It's premeditated evil, with wand flicks. But let's not ignore the quiet killers. Spells that don't make the headlines, but are just as twisted. Imagine using Obliviate, not just to erase a few memories, but to wipe someone's entire identity. Or casting Legilimens constantly to violate someone's mind without their consent. There's a darker layer to magic that isn't about flashy green lights. It's about manipulation, control, and knowing exactly which boundary to cross without getting caught. Even Dumbledore knew that morality in magic wasn't just about what spell you used, but why. He once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Chamber of Secrets. That quote? It applies to the gray areas of magic more than anywhere else. A simple spell used with dark intent can be far worse than a forbidden curse cast in desperation. And speaking of desperation, what about the poor house elves? All it takes is a sock to free them, But is that really as noble as it sounds? Let's talk about that next, because what counts as freedom in the wizarding world is a little fuzzy. Ah, yes. The sock heard round the world. Who knew laundry could be so revolutionary? In Chamber of Secrets, Harry stuffs a sock in Tom Riddle's diary and hands it to Lucius Malfoy, who then carelessly tosses it to Dobby. Boom. Elf is free. But here's where it gets interesting. It's not just about the clothes, it's about the intention. The elf must receive a garment from their master, directly or indirectly, for it to count. No wizarding loopholes unless you're Harry, of course. Now, Hermione, bless her overachieving soul, tries to hide clothes all over the Gryffindor common room so the elves will accidentally find them and earn their freedom. Sweet, right? Yeah, not really. The elves get offended. Because here's the thing, not all of them want to be free. For many, serving wizards is a source of pride. Twisted? A little. But that's the complexity of magical society for you. Freedom doesn't look the same to everyone. Still, there's an unspoken rule. If a wizard gives a piece of clothing, even without realizing it, the magic considers that valid. Which is why Lucius losing his temper and throwing the sock was enough. Context matters, intent matters. But magic sometimes follows rules the caster doesn't even know they're playing by. It's like arguing with your phone's autocorrect. Sometimes it decides for you and you just have to live with the consequences. This whole house elf debate actually mirrors bigger issues in the wizarding world, like systemic inequality and how freedom is defined by those in power. Rowling wrapped some real-world ethics into a sock metaphor. Impressive, huh? But still, why is it that such a powerful system of servitude can be undone by laundry? That tells you something about the layers of irony in this world. And speaking of layers, let's peel back another one. How scared were wizards outside Britain of Voldemort? Was he the Dark Lord of just the UK, or were others shaking in their boots too? Let's get into that next. So here's the million-galleon question. Was Voldemort really that big of a deal outside the UK? Like, did wizards in Brazil or Japan whisper, "He who must not be named," to, or just shrug and go back to sipping butterbeer? The answer? Yes, but with a huge asterisk. Voldemort was absolutely feared beyond Britain, but the panic didn't spread globally with the same intensity. Think of him like a terrifying local legend. Everyone's heard of him, but unless he's knocking on your front door, it's not exactly top priority. Let's face it, Voldemort was laser-focused on Britain. Why? One word: prophecy. Once that whole neither can live while the other survives business popped up, he basically ignored the rest of the magical world. It's like having world domination on your to-do list, but your high school nemesis keeps distracting you. So while other magical communities kept tabs on him, they weren't building bunkers or casting mass shielding charms just yet. That said, Voldemort did attempt to expand his reach. In the Goblet of Fire, we hear whispers of his followers operating abroad, and some Death Eaters had international ties. But without an army or a full-blown magical UN invasion plan, his influence remained mostly domestic. Plus, other regions had their own dark wizards and magical threats. Grindelwald, for example, was a global problem, not just a European one. Voldemort? He kept it cozy. Another thing to consider is that magical governments aren't exactly great at communication. The International Confederation of Wizards is more like a magical version of the UN, bureaucratic, slow, and very good at pretending problems don't exist until they're on fire. So even when Voldemort returned, the global response was more, Britain's being weird again, rather than, let's send reinforcements. But speaking of weird, why the heck doesn't magic play nice with phones and laptops? Let's talk about tech next, because wizards may have spells for death and time travel, but they still can't get Wi-Fi. You'd think that a society advanced enough to bottle luck and bend time would have figured out how to send a text message by now, right? But nope. In the wizarding world, Muggle tech is basically allergic to magic. Phones glitch, computers crash, and forget about Wi-Fi. It's like trying to set up a router inside a hurricane. The high concentration of magical energy in places like Hogwarts messes with electronics so badly, your phone might just turn into a toad for spite. Why does this happen? Well, according to Pottermore and various fan-confirmed sources, magic and modern tech operate on totally different frequencies. It's kind of like trying to play a vinyl record on a toaster. It's just not meant to happen. The two systems don't mesh. Wizards never needed it anyway. Why send an email when you've got owls? And why Google something when you can ask a portrait who's been dead for 400 years but still knows your business? Still, it's not that wizards hate technology. They just don't understand it. Arthur Weasley is basically the Steve Jobs of wizarding curiosity, but even he thought batteries were eccentricity. Most wizards grow up so insulated from Muggle life that they view a toaster the way we'd view an ancient cursed artifact. Fascinating, a little terrifying, and definitely capable of exploding. The weirdest part? Some magical folk actually do try to blend the two worlds. There are stories of half-bloods enchanting radios to play wizard music, or using magic to charge Muggle devices. But for the most part, trying to use your iPhone at Hogwarts is like bringing a Rubik's Cube to a wand duel. It's just not going to end well. Now that raises an even weirder question. If spells can disrupt machines, could they also bounce off certain creatures? For instance, can you Avada Kedavra a dragon? Because, let's be honest, some monsters don't go down with one green flash. Here's something that'll make your wand hand twitch. Can Avada Kedavra kill a dragon? I mean, it's the killing curse. It's supposed to end any life instantly, no exceptions, right? Well, not exactly. Dragons, in the wizarding world, are a different beast altogether. Literally. They're magically resistant creatures with thick, armored hides, centuries-old instincts, and enough firepower to melt castle walls. Throwing Avada Kedavra at a dragon might be like trying to kill a tank with a paperclip. In Goblet of Fire, we see that dragons are used in the Triwizard Tournament, not because they're tame, but because even powerful wizards struggle to take them down. If Avada Kedavra worked reliably on them, don't you think someone would have just zapped their way through the first task? But nope. Contestants had to distract, evade, and outsmart their way to victory, not just throw dark curses around. That tells us something. Plus, it's worth remembering that Avada Kedavra doesn't rely on brute strength. It's about magical focus, intent, and direct line of sight. If the spell can't penetrate the dragon's magical defenses, or even land properly, it might not work at all. Magic in the Potterverse isn't one size fits all. The effectiveness of a spell often depends on the magical resistance of the target, and dragons are basically walking fortresses with wings. On top of that, using Avada Kedavra is illegal, period. Even during the Triwizard Tournament, the Ministry wouldn't have been cool with students whipping out forbidden curses. So we're talking about high-risk, low-reward magic in a situation where even skilled adults struggle. Dragons are not just big, they're built like magical tanks. You don't mess with them unless you're desperate, or Hagrid. And if dragons can shrug off death spells, what about mind control or truth potions? Can Veritaserum crack a criminal, or are memories and minds just as resistant to magic? Let's break that down next. So, why don't wizard courts just use Veritaserum and Pensieves to get to the truth? Seems simple, right? Slap a few drops of truth potion into someone's tea, toss their memories into a Pensieve, and boom, instant justice. But as with everything in the wizarding world, it's not that easy. Veritaserum can make someone spill the beans, but it's not foolproof. Skilled wizards, especially those trained in occlumency, can resist it, twist their words, or flat-out block its effects. Even Dumbledore didn't trust it entirely. In Goblet of Fire, he tells Harry that Veritaserum has limitations. People under the influence might reveal false memories, misinformation, or even stuff they believe is true but isn't. So you're not just getting facts. You're getting whatever's floating around in their magical subconscious. And that's a legal nightmare waiting to happen. Now, what about memories? Surely they can't lie, right? Well, not quite. Memories stored in a Pensieve can be altered, snipped, polished, edited like a magical TikTok. Think about Slughorn's Memory and Half-Blood Prince. He literally chopped out the truth and left behind a manipulated version. So unless you've got the original untouched memory, you're working with a version of events that may or may not be reliable. Great for storytelling. Terrible for court cases. This is why the wizarding justice system still leans heavily on good old-fashioned questioning, evidence, and unfortunately, personal bias. Remember the kangaroo court Harry faced at the Ministry in Order of the Phoenix? No Veritaserum, no Pensieve, just stern faces and magical politics. And let's be real, justice in the wizarding world often depends more on who you know than what you did. But speaking of objects that can carry magic and memories, could you actually turn a wand into a Horcrux? And if so, what happens when you break it? Things are about to get even darker. So here's a twisted question straight out of Voldemort's playbook. Can a wand be made into a Horcrux? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes, but why would you want to mess with something that unstable? See, a wand already has a kind of consciousness. It chooses its wizard, adapts to its user, and stores its own form of magical loyalty. turning it into a Horcrux. That's like cramming two souls into one piece of wood and expecting it not to explode at the worst possible moment. Voldemort himself came dangerously close. Remember the resurrection stone hidden inside the Gaunt family ring? That cursed object was worn like jewelry, but it could have just as easily been embedded into a wand. And if that kind of cursed energy mixed with a wand's natural magical core, you're looking at a walking time bomb. You thought Elder Wand drama was bad? Imagine fighting with a Horcrux wand that wants to possess you mid-duel. Now, technically, there's no rule in canon that says a wand can't be a Horcrux. The only real requirement is that the object holds significance to the wizard. For Voldemort, sentimental value mattered. Every Horcrux had personal meaning, his diary, the locket, the diadem. So if someone's wand carried that emotional weight, totally eligible. Just deeply unstable and ethically horrifying. You know, the usual, but what happens if you break it? That's a nightmare scenario. You're not just snapping a piece of wood, you're damaging a vessel holding a shattered soul. It could cause magical feedback, backlash, or worse, partial possession. You don't just toss a Horcrux wand into the Forbidden Forest and hope for the best. That thing needs to be destroyed the hard way. Basilisk venom, fiend fire, or maybe a very angry Hermione with a grudge. And speaking of magical potions, what happens when a werewolf like Lupin no longer has access to the one thing keeping him stable? The post-Hogwarts chapter of his life is a lot less romantic, and we're going there next. After Lupin left Hogwarts, a question quietly haunted the background. What happened to his access to the Wolfsbane potion? During his time as a professor, Snape brewed it for him regularly. Grudgingly, of course. But it worked. It didn't cure his condition, but it gave him control. He could transform into a calm, tired wolf instead of a mindless killing machine. That's not just convenience, it's survival. Without it, every full moon becomes a potential headline. Werewolf rampages through Hogsmeade. Once Lupin resigned, though, Snape had no obligation, and, let's be honest, no desire, to keep helping him. The guy was already hostile about brewing it while Lupin was on staff. Afterward, that door slammed shut faster than you can say Expelliarmus. And it's not like you can pick up Wolfsbane potion at your local apothecary. It's extremely complex, time-sensitive, and dangerous to brew. This isn't your grandma's calming chamomile. So Lupin was left in a tough spot. No job, limited resources, and no potion to keep him stable. This added fuel to the isolation and guilt that had followed him all his life. In Order of the Phoenix, we see him working with the Resistance, not because he's doing great, but because he's got nowhere else to go. No home, no stability, and once again, every full moon is a ticking time bomb. And don't forget, this is a society that barely tolerates werewolves. The stigma is brutal. Even if he had the knowledge to brew it himself, which he probably didn't, he still needed rare ingredients and uninterrupted time, two luxuries he couldn't afford while constantly moving with the Order. So the tragic truth? After Hogwarts, Lupin likely had to face the moon raw again, alone and unprotected. Now that we've explored everything from magical courtrooms to cursed wands and werewolf potions, let's rewind for a moment. Remember that simple question that kicked all this off? Can a wizard actually transfer to another school of magic? It's time to hook your viewers with that in the intro. So, if switching magic schools is actually possible, what else don't we know about the wizarding world? What secrets are hidden behind those enchanted walls? And here's a better question. If you were a student at Hogwarts and had the chance to transfer, would you do it? Where would you go? Ouagadougou, Durmstrang, Ilvermorny? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your theories. And hey, if this kind of deep dive into magical details got you thinking, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's a lot more magic to uncover, and you don't want to miss it. Oh, and before you go, ever wondered if wands have an expiration date? Click on the video right here and prepare to have your mind blown.